This video production is brought to you by the Sanlam Foundation. Hi, I'm Matthew Lester from the Rhodes University Business School in Grahamstown. This is a little presentation that I've put together to help graduates in getting going with their financial planning. So many graduates make the mistake that it's just a case of leaving university and getting on with a job and a new life. There's more to it than that, and there are many expensive mistakes that you can avoid in the first year after graduation. So many students start off a career in a family as follows. They say, find a job, graduate, get going, start working, start playing, start spending. And in the first 5 years, they try to do everything. They start working, they find a car, they find a faster car, then they find a digs, then they buy the digs, then they get the toys and they buy them all on installment sale. And then it's a case of iPod, iPad, iPhone before you've bought an iron and even a Mac. And all of this just gets going. Then one adds in a spouse and the expenses rise and rise. Before you know where you are, you're shacked up, knocked up, hitched with kids, in-laws and outlaws, and goodness knows what else. A totally unplanned family environment, both from a personal and a financial point of view. What this results in is the debt trap that we hear so much about on the press today. Why are people so in debt? And the answer is that they haven't thought about what they're doing before they've taken the plunge on anything. The result is that by the time that they're 25 or 30 years old, we find that they're flat broke with no escape, because they can't simply sell everything and pay off their debts. They have accumulated a whole load of commitments. A car will take you 5 years to pay off whether you want to or not. A cell phone contract lasts for 2, even if the cell phone doesn't last that long. A house takes 20 years to pay off, and the reality is a spouse, pets, and kids is a lifetime commitment. And what one has to do is say, think before you leap. Here are some ideas. Otherwise, you can land yourself in a tremendous debt position. The basic phases of financial planning are like a suspension bridge. You start off getting educated, and that's the phase of your life that you're basically finishing now. Then next step is to get started, and that's where everybody makes the mistakes and accumulates a whole load of debt and commitments before they even get to the stage of their life when they are really earning. Really earning really comes from 35 to 65 years old. That's when one accumulates wealth and one hopes to get really what one wants out of life before ultimately landing up in the retirement process, which can be as long as another 20 years. So what one has to bear in mind is there's a suspension bridge and that all works. But if early in your life you make some major mistakes and part of the suspension bridge falls, well then very shortly thereafter the whole thing will be collapsing and you will be left with just your education to fall back on, which is a lot more than most people have, but we don't want that to happen. What we find when we study this further is that the debt trap results in a whole lot of other dreaded Ds. And debts can be traced to the cause of being down and out, depressed, even a drunk or a drug addict, dumped, or even divorced. All of these things can start in the first year after graduation if you are not extremely careful. So let's play it again, Sam, and say, is all we are initially asking you to do is to say, starting off a career in the first 5 years, don't try and do everything. Plan it. Take it easy. You've got 40 years to stuff up your life, but rather take it easy, take it slowly, and it'll go a whole lot better. We need to start working. We need to establish what your package is, and more importantly, what your take-home package is. Then we go from there to saying we have to manage your risks of living in the new South Africa and establish a very important message that there is nobody to catch you if you fall. Then one has to draft up a budget so that we know what is exactly going on with your finances. From there on, you can read the menu of life and decide what you want to do, and then we can go into deciding which of all of those things you want to have. Maybe it's all of them, and maybe you will get them as time goes by. The big trick, though, is not to get them all caught up in the first year and land up in a debt trap. Step one when starting off is to establish how much you're actually going to earn. And there's a huge difference in that between the actual package that is quoted to you when you accept a job, which is the cost to your employer, and the take-home package, which is what you're going to take home to actually spend, which is probably 30% less than what your cost to your employer is. We have to go out there and say, we live in a country where there are an enormous number of dependents. We joke about that in the context of the president, but actually what one needs to look at and say, how many dependents does the president actually have? And very quickly one needs to look at this and say, there are 50 million South Africans today. And what do they look like? We have to provide for 1.4 million disabled people, of which only 27,000 have a job. Then there are 2 million AIDS orphans, 4% of the population. There are 10 million children plus who need a child grant to survive. Then there are the children who do not need a support grant, but nevertheless are dependent on their parents. And then there are 2 million old age pensioners in South Africa who have absolutely nothing. That's nearly half the population. And we're supporting them, okay, sort of, but the problem is that there are a lot more people that we are going to have to look after inside of the next 10 years. Because when you turn 18 in South Africa and you don't get a job, you join the category of 4 million unemployed people or 10 million people who have simply given up and are not looking for work anymore. That takes up another 25% of the population. The remaining quarter of the population has to, in one way or another, support the previous 75% of the population. And it goes something like this. Yes, there are 12 to 13 million South Africans who do have a job, but the first 9 million of them fall below the tax threshold, the level at which you pay tax in South Africa, which is currently around about 5,000 rands a month. So they don't pay anything into the system, they simply look after themselves. Then there are about 4 million taxpayers, about 3.3 to 3.5 million, live below the category of 500,000 rands per annum, and they really don't pay a huge amount of tax per capita, but in all they pay a lot of tax when put together. And then finally there are the fat cats, or the big oaks as we call them. There are only about 150,000 of them in South Africa today. That's quite a frightening prospect, that tiny little red sliver that finally remains on the pie chart. The frightening thing about graduating is that you will start off in the taxpayer category of the 3.3 million middle-class worker and hopefully work up to the fat cat position where you will be in a tiny little class of people of 150,000. Now, when one puts all of this together and one looks at the tax tables, we say, well, so what? What does that actually mean? And it means that when you are a low-income earner, below 250,000 rands per year, your tax level does not exceed 25% of your income. They try as much as possible to help the lower-level taxpayer. More frightening is when one goes above 250,000 rands earnings per annum, your income tax increases to 30% and then 35%, and very quickly thereafter into the categories of 38% and finally 40% if your income exceeds 617,000 rands per annum. That's going to hurt you like crazy. When one looks at the 4 million taxpayers in South Africa, one finds that the first million or so of them actually don't pay tax because they're below tax threshold. The next group that earn between 60 and 120,000 per annum, they number 25% of the taxpayers, about 1 million of them, but they only pay 4% of South Africa's tax. When you graduate, you will probably fall into the category 120,000 to 400,000, there are about 3.5 million taxpayers who sit there, and they pay 42% of South Africa's tax. But what you're aspiring to be is one of the taxpayers who are earning in super tax level. There are only 378,000, and they pay 54% of South Africa's tax. But after you graduate, there are other costs to be paid. And the first one up is your medical costs. There are 42 million South Africans who don't have medical cover. They rely on the state healthcare system, and we have read a lot about the challenges that the healthcare system is facing over the next few years. So you're going to probably have to go out there and buy your own medical cover. The most basic medical cover today through Discovery Health costs 892 Rand per member per month, up to a total of 2,273 Rand per family per month. Then, if you want to go to what we call executive cover level, you can pay as much as 3,365 Rands per month for comprehensive medical aid cover, or 8,000 Rand per family per month. It's an enormous commitment, and paying towards that is only a small tax rebate of 230 Rand per month from government off your tax bill for the first 2 members, and thereafter, for every child you may have, 154 Rands per month. It works out at being less than about 10% of your total medical costs are actually paid by government. It never exceeds 25% of the total cost. Then there will be other deductions on your payroll. Your group life insurance, your income protection. Those 2 items may or may not be offered by your employer, but you're going to need them whether they are provided or not. You will need a dread disease cover, unemployment insurance cover, and so it goes on. Where does it all go? Well, draw it up a T account and put your income on the right. Let's say that this is a graduate, just qualified, earning 25,000 Rands per month. Now we start the deductions made by the employer. Unemployment insurance fund would be 125 Rand. A provident fund, if provided, would be 3,200 Rand. Medical aid costs, probably in the order of 1,200 Rand for a single person. And then income tax of 3,556. A group life insurance premium, if provided, of 272 Rand, and an income protection insurance of a further 182 Rand. Total deductions against the 25,000 Rand, 8,535 Rand, leaving a take-home pay of 16,465 Rand. Notice you've lost a huge slice before you even start. Part of what can be provided and help you along in this process is an Excel spreadsheet which is prepared to help you make up a monthly budget. Here's an example of one which can be downloaded off the Sanlam website. And basically what one has to do is start filling in and planning where all of that income is going to go, and how quickly we land up with a position that there is no more money left when there's a lot of the month left. So what we would do with an Excel spreadsheet like this is that we would fill in the take-home pay and say, right, well, I have got 16,465 Rand left. That's a great, not too bad. Watch how quickly I can spend it. Just to live in a basic digs is going to cost you 5,000 Rand per month. Your food and clothing, not less than 3,000 Rands a month. That's half of it gone. Then you've got to have wheels to get to work. 5,250 Rand I've put there as a conservative estimate. Then you're going to need a cell phone and basic utilities, and your other expenses such as your credit card, etc. Already with those basic expenses, 19,250 Rand per month is gone, which is more than the salary. In this case, there would be a 2,785 Rand shortfall. And the big mistake with this is that people look at that, they don't have a graphic presentation in their mind as to where the money is going, as can be provided by such a spreadsheet. And so they just donor on, and they carry on, and when they run out of money, off they go and they start to borrow. And they borrow more and more, and within a couple of years, they can borrow no more because of the National Credit Act, and that's where people find it very difficult, and they land up in the debt trap situation. Here are some useful tips for starting off. Get the basic tools of trade, but be modest. You need a car to get to work. You can't live without a cell phone. You need a computer today, and you need basic digs. Get those and stop at that point. Don't go and make a whole load of fantastic commitments to take that further. Then next step, secure your future in South Africa. You've gone and spent 3 or 4 years, even more, at university trying to get yourself qualified so that you can start earning some money. Now what we have to do is say, look at the options that are available to cover your medical aid if you haven't got one. What's happening with your dreaded disease cover, your sickness benefits, your unemployment insurance, and your income protection. What we've got to say is, I've got to be able to continue to earn even if I have an accident or some other unfortunate circumstances overwhelm me. Those costs are quite easily and cheaply covered at this stage of your life because you're simply quite young and you are a good risk to an insurance company. But you need that cover because there's nobody to catch you if you fall. To get this right, you need some professional help. There's simply an overwhelming amount of information and product available on the internet, and this is made available to the general public, not necessarily a graduate. A professional advisor can show you the right product and, very importantly, secure the right price for you. You need to establish a relationship with such a person so that we can get the right cover in place at an affordable price, which is not going to bankrupt you in the early years that you are earning. When one looks at this, one's got to say, live for 2 years and consolidate your new position with a job and a degree without going and making a whole lot of long-term commitments to everybody. Learn to live with yourself. It's an exciting new time, but you don't need to, that doesn't mean you have to go and make commitments to everybody. Think 10 times before you borrow. The biggest cause of the social diseases of debt trap results from debt trap. Maintain only a cash card with internet banking facilities. One doesn't have to run out and get a credit card today. That's just going to cost you a whole lot more money and lead you into a position where you can run up a whole lot more debt. Let your earning potential grow. You will find that as you gain experience, your earnings will rise far faster than the inflation rate, and as your earnings grow, you can then decide which of the nice things in life you want to have. Remember, your career spans 40 years if you keep your health and you keep out of debt. All you need in your life is a brain to make money, your health to drive your brain, time to let money grow, and an email address. The big mistake that people make is that they don't look at it from the point of view of let's get on with it. They deny that there's a problem, and we have that old South African problem of môre is nog 'n dag, and we can delay things for later. That's a process of denial, and that wipes out the time advantage that you may have. And when denial replaces time in financial planning, that eventually wipes out the whole damn thing. So please, this is something that you need to get on with almost as soon as you graduate. Well, believe it or not, there are people to help you with this. There are people who make a whole career out of advising graduates as to which way to go with their financial planning. What we're wanting to do is to say to you, look at your finances as being one of the key things that you have to deal with post-graduation. You don't go to casual advice on this. This is not advice that you get from your friends around a braaivleis or something like that. Go to people who have the products and the knowledge and the experience of how to deal with this. You wouldn't go to a friend just to discuss your health, unless he was a doctor. You wouldn't build a house without going to an architect. And today, you wouldn't fix a modern car in your backyard. You're simply not equipped to deal with that. And that's why it's important to find a financial advisor and develop a relationship over a period of time where you can face the future and the financial challenges of living in South Africa without making expensive mistakes.